European Union agriculture ministers are meeting in Brussels after weeks of protest by farmers across the bloc. Demonstrators have blocked off access to official buildings, dumped tires in the streets, and set them alight. They are upset over Brussels' environmental policies, rising costs, and what they call unfair competition. Now, EU officials appear keen to ease some of those pressures on the agricultural sector, but there are fears doing so could weaken action on climate change. Rosie Burchard joins us now. She is in Brussels covering the story for us. Rosie, what's going on behind you?
Yeah, pretty dramatic scenes here in Brussels. It's the middle of the European Union quarter. That is a smouldering, burning pile of tyres. We've seen farmers also adding bales of hay into this blaze, and that blaze behind me comes after police just managed to extinguish another fire. Police have been firing water cannon on that. As you can see, that's been extinguished now, but there is still a very heavy police presence. And then on the other side, you will see, well, tractors almost as far as the eye can see here in Brussels. This is the heart of the European Union's headquarters, and this part of the city really is paralysed. Just a few steps from here, really, EU agriculture ministers are meeting to try and respond to some of this frustration so clearly seen on these streets today.
What are the farmers demanding?
Well, I should say these protests have been going on across Europe, not just here in Brussels, and there are pretty disparate demands. Some are concerned about cost, some about competition. But I've actually been to a farm here in Belgium to try and learn about what is taking such a daily toll on farmers' lives here. Take a listen to my report.
2 hours after she was born, it's time for this baby calf to try and stand on her own 2 feet. That struggle to stay afloat is one this small dairy farm in southern Belgium knows well, with milk prices proving unpredictable and costs remaining high.
It's difficult to get a return on your investment and have a long-term perspective. The sudden peaks in 2022, then shocks in 2023, have really strangled some farms.
Farmer Aurélie Leclerc counts on subsidies to help her keep production churning. In fact, agriculture funds make up almost a third of the European Union budget, but many are still feeling squeezed.
We would like to be able to live without subsidies and just have reasonable prices, but that's not possible right now.
For weeks now, farmers have been taking that frustration to the streets, grinding traffic to a halt in Berlin, Brussels and other capitals across the continent. In response, the European Union has moved to ease some green farming rules, curb grain imports from Ukraine and shelve new laws to further restrict pesticide use.
Farmers are feeling the impact of the Russian war, inflation, the rising costs of energy, the rising costs of fertilizers. Nevertheless, they work hard every day to produce the quality food we eat. And for this, I think we owe them appreciations and thanks and respect.
The problem is, agriculture accounts for more than 10% of EU emissions, and many campaigners fear watering down climate laws will set Europe on the wrong track, with elections looming.
We see that in many countries that far-right parties are actually instrumentalizing the voice of the farmers, and it is targeted as environmental legislation. But again, targeting environmental legislation is going to be the main threat to farming eventually. So if we're not able to make farming less emitting greenhouse gas, we are not going to make it.
After a tough winter, farmers are hoping for easier times.
You can already hear the birds singing.
But to make this industry economically and environmentally sustainable, it looks like some heavy lifting still lies ahead.
Well, that kind of peaceful mood that was on that farm just feels like a million miles away now, here with smoke still billowing out of here. One of the concerns I've heard from farmers here is about the subsidies. So while farmers can count on subsidies, they're divided up according to how big the land the farmers own is or are working on. So that means often smaller farmers are complaining about it not getting to them. That's just one of a long list of complaints that farmers have taken to Brussels today.
And from what you're hearing there, are EU agriculture ministers prepared to meet some of those farmers' demands?
Well, what I should say is I think EU officials are really racing to try and respond to this. And I should say I've covered all sorts of protests over years in Brussels, and I think I've rarely seen such a quick policy response in terms of trying to come forward with proposals that try and cut red tape, for example. We've seen them trying to curb some agricultural imports from Ukraine, which were seen as anti-competitive, for example, by some EU farmers. However, from what I've heard from these protesters here today, that certainly, they say, has not gone far enough. And listen, we are just a couple of months away from key European Union elections. I think EU officials are very concerned that farmers might take their votes to the far right if they feel their demands are not met. And on the other side of the spectrum, as we heard in the report, climate campaigners very scared that EU officials might go too far to water down climate legislation and compromise on some of those big climate promises. Now, it's been less than a month since these protesters were last here. I was out on the streets with them that time as well. But it looks to me that they will be coming back, and so some of these dramatic scenes you're seeing behind me now may certainly not be the last here in Brussels.
Rosie Burchard in Brussels, thank you.